Hello. Welcome everyone, and thank you very much for joining us from around the world to this ITC Alliances for Action webinar on the new EU organic regulation, What is going to change? My name is Kades Teklu from the International Trade Center Alliances for Action team. Before we dive into the session, just a few logistics. Please note, simultaneous interpretation of the session will be provided in English, French, Spanish, so please choose your preferred language to listen to the session. There will also be a dedicated Q&A session at the end. Therefore, please use the Q&A icon to type your questions, and we'll be very grateful if you could also indicate your organization and to which panelist you would like to direct your questions. We're also live on YouTube, and we'll also be recording the session and uploading it to the ITC YouTube channel, and we'll be emailing you the link after the event. We'll be together for the next 2 hours, and I'm very pleased to let you know this event has attracted more than 800 participants from 87 countries, which is truly a testament to the importance of the topic we have in front of us. For this, we would like to extend our appreciation to our donors and partners, in particular to the European Union and to the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States for their long-standing partnership and support to the ITC Alliances for Action program, which delivers support to farmers and cooperatives in Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean, and the Pacific. The objective of the session is to raise awareness of the new changes and for all of us present here and of course beyond to reflect on ways in which we could work in partnership to support producers. With that, I would like to give a very warm welcome to our speakers. We'll start the session with opening remarks from Mr. Ashish Shah, Director of the Division of Country Programs at the International Trade Center, followed by Mr. Nicolas Verle, Senior Expert, Directorate B, Quality, Research and Innovation, Outreach, DG Agri, European Commission, and Mr. Leonard Mizzi, Head of Unit of DevCo C1, Rural Development, Food Security, Nutrition, European Commission, and Ms. Ivan Shileshi, Expert on Protocol on the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States, who kindly is replacing Mr. Oliveira last minute. Thank you very much. Following the opening remarks, we'll move to the technical session, which will be moderated by Mr. Emanuele Busacca from International Federation of Organic Agriculture Movement, IFOAM Organic Europe, who will be joined by our panel of experts, Mr. Michel Renaud from the Organic Certification Organization EcoCert, Ms. Marique de Peña from Latin America and Caribbean Network of Fair Trade Small Producers and Workers, Ms. Karin Mapuswa from the Pacific Community, and Mr. Sergi Corbalin from the Fair Trade Advocacy Office. Welcome everyone, and I will now invite Mr. Ashish Shah to say a few words. Mr. Shah, you have the floor.
Okay, so thank you, Kades, and good afternoon, buenos dias, and bonjour to everyone. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar entitled The New EU Organic Regulation, What is Going to Change? This webinar could not have been organized at a better time. This week, on Friday, the 16th of October, we will celebrate World Food Day, which is a stark reminder that access to safe and healthy food is a basic human right. World Food Day also reminds us of the people who allow us to get food at our tables. First and foremost, the farmers and their cooperatives, processors, exporters, importers, transporters, logistics providers, and a large number of other stakeholders who interact with each other so that we the people, can enjoy our aromatic morning coffee or our kava drink in the Pacific, or our post-dinner chocolates, or the tortilla, the chapati, and the fufu, which are part of our everyday staple diet. They are all part of the food supply chain. And on World Food Day, we need to remember that we have a shared responsibility not only to ensure safe and healthy food for our consumers, but also to ensure that people and actors in the food and agricultural supply chain, particularly farming communities, can have sufficient income, livelihoods, and access to markets. Today's webinar is an opportunity for different actors in the EU and beyond to exchange perspectives on this new organic regulation. And I'm extremely pleased that ITC has been able to organize this event today to provide a platform for this exchange. We see this as a beginning of a journey where we as an international organization will play our role in making the regulation and its implications easier to understand for farmers, for cooperatives, and for all the people who are impacted in one way or another by this new regulation. We also see our role in providing technical assistance and capacity building support to agricultural communities and actors in agricultural value chains in developing countries so that they can comply with the regulation, leverage the opportunities which it creates, and use it to their advantage. We will do this through our Alliances for Action initiative, which uses a 5-pillar approach to bring together people in agricultural value chains to help build win-win strategic alliances so that everyone gains at the end. Alliances for Action will continue to build on its work in developing countries and in the ACP region to make people aware of and comply with the new legislation, to address implementation bottlenecks, and most importantly, to ensure that the new regulation benefits everyone, from the small farmer in Colombia and Ghana to the regulator in the EU and the consumers all across the world. Ladies and gentlemen, we are living in difficult times where lives and livelihoods are being lost, where stories of despair, desperation, and devastation come forward every day, and where pandemic and COVID-19 have become the most widely used terms in 2020. At a time like this, it is important for all of us to work together to steer the boat in the same direction. Today's webinar is a small step in this process by allowing people with different perspectives based on their own realities to come together to understand the perspectives of others. The importance of this topic is proven by the fact that we have more than 800 people, as you heard from Kidest, from 87 countries joining us today from across the world, from Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean, from Europe, and from Asia and the Pacific. I want to thank all our partners who have been co-organizing this event. Of course, the European Union, the Organization of ACP States, and a large number of farmer-based organizations who are working with us and without whom we would not have been able to put this event together. I look forward to listening to and learning from all the panelists today and wish you all a good and animated discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ashish. Unfortunately, Mr. Verley is having difficulties with connecting. So if I can call on Mr. Leonardo Misi. Mr. Leonardo, you have the floor.
Thank you, and good afternoon. And first of all, I would like to reiterate what Ashish said earlier on. We are in a very important moment this week with the launch of the Committee on the World Food Security in virtual mode. The CFS is the platform for a multi-stakeholder discussion around agriculture and food systems. And on Friday, we have World Food Day. Last week as well, we had the adjudication of the Nobel Peace Prize to the World Food Programme, a recognition of putting agriculture, food, nutrition, and the humanitarian development peace nexus at the core of the international agenda. So what we are discussing today in terms of the Alliance for Action is an opportune moment to take stock of agricultural value chains as part of the solution, clearly from a development cooperation and angle. We will in January be international partnerships. The idea is actually to have a partnership approach, the concept of an alliance in terms of value chains. We have started this a few days ago on the 22nd of September on cocoa, with the launch of a multi-stakeholder dialogue on cocoa value chains, because we consider that we need all players across the value chain, from the bean to the final chocolate in the case of cocoa, similar to coffee, with a strong discussion at the highest level in multilateral fora. So in cocoa, in coffee, in cotton, in fruit and vegetables. I think any regulatory process, and we are discussing a regulatory process also around cocoa in terms of deforestation. So horizontal proposals being discussed with our colleagues in environment. On due diligence, also to tackle issues around child labor and corporate social responsibility, but also sector-specific ideas, but involving all players across the value chain. And I think what, with other colleagues in the Commission services, in a collegial approach, I think what is important is that we put all the stakeholders around the table and see that any regulatory processes does not do any harm. So in the context and in the principles of the policy coherence for development. We can't achieve policy coherence for development if we don't give importance to the impact on smallholders. And I think the elements also of the World Food Day, and the elements that are coming out from CFS of inclusiveness, of equity, also gives us an opportune moment to take stock of what would be the impact of a regulatory process on the weakest parts of the value chain, whether they are small farm holders which don't necessarily have access to land, issues around access to finance. And we have good cases where we are trying to build a portfolio of good cases where within a circular economy approach, within the concept of fairness, of gender mainstreaming, we can showcase and scale up these experiences, also around concepts like agroecology, which is also one of the core discussions which is taking place these days in CFS, and which will culminate with a document in February of next year, and also in the context of the UN Food System Summit. What we need to look at today with all the participants from the Latin American region, to the African region, to the Asia Pacific, to the islands across the globe is how can we take a robust regulatory approach which does not do any harm, which actually facilitates the transition, because we also want, within the context of the EU Green Deal and the Farm to Fork, to have the highest standards possible in terms of environmental and social standard setting across the value chain, but that regulation is sensitive to the weakest parts of the link, and that we can help accompany farming communities through our initiatives, through our programs. We are now in the stage of pre-programming across the globe. And once we have the multi-financial framework in place, we can identify, on the basis of a demand-driven agenda of your partner countries, to accompany these processes in a food systems approach. The business as usual model will not do the trick, especially in a COVID recovery mode. We want a green recovery mode where actually practices like organic, conservation agriculture, agroecology can actually be parts of the toolbox, where we want to strengthen farmers' organizations, as we are doing with the Rome-based agencies, where we give the necessary tools, but we also need to empower farmers' organizations to scale up their operations, to integrate better their operations, to enhance food safety, to reduce fertilizer use, so that actually there can be better living incomes and living wages, and accompany a strong agriculture research for development component, because we consider that any transformation process needs to be embedded with a strong agriculture research. So I am looking forward to the proceedings of today, and with other colleagues in the Commission services, with our member states, co-create, co-design processes in a Team Europe context, where we can actually help support this transition process, and where hopefully within a year's time, we can come up with pathways which will also include pathways around agroecology, organic agriculture, from different experiences across the globe. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mizzi. We have now Mr. Verle on the phone. Please, you have the floor. Mr. Verle, can you hear us? Okay, let's just maybe wait a little bit and move to Ms. Ivan Sheleshi. Ms. Sheleshi, you have the floor, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to you all. First and foremost, to apologize from our Assistant Secretary General, Mr. Ecipian Olivier, who unfortunately could not join the session at the last minute. He was really excited about this opportunity, but unfortunately he's not able to make it. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of our OACPS ambassadors, the EU partners, regional bodies, the organic certification organizations, and of course, the many participants who are joining us today. Lastly, I want to thank ITC for bringing all the partners to have this very important discussion. I think the previous speakers have highlighted the importance of why we should have this discussion, especially that we are in the wake where we are celebrating World Food Day. From the OACPS, we are very happy to be participating in this webinar, which is timely, especially in view as we prepare to participate and basically have an exchange at the WTO. And I'm sure everybody have noted that on the 18th of September, there was a notification on this new regulation. So we see this as a platform to enable us to exchange, understand each other's positions, and try and see how we can find a solution. For OACPS, we have been discussing the EU regulation for some time now, and I do note that colleagues from the EU have actually been kind enough to come to our meetings to basically highlight information about this regulation. And in the past, we have alerted a number of concerns which relate to the possible negative impact of the regulation, the impact that it may have on trade in organic products between the EU and the OACP member states. We have discussed issues related to the group certification, the legal entity, and the inspection. And as was noted, most of our members, most of our constituencies in the ACP region actually are composed of small scale farmers. And we have noted that these changes could create unnecessary burdens for the OACPS organic sector, where sourcing involves many small-scale farmers working through organized groups or cooperatives. We are therefore hopeful and really happy that we're having this discussion today, because we believe that this will give us an opportunity to also look at some of the alternatives that have been put on the table. That include, for instance, the need to recognize cooperatives, federations, and exporters with affiliated farms as certified legal group entities. In another vein, as Secretariat, we are trying to also prepare our member states better with regard to these regulations. And so we have initiated discussions on the possibility of setting up an early warning mechanism on trade regulations. We hope that this can be one of the next steps, outcomes that this meeting could consider. With these few remarks, I would like to wish everybody a fruitful meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, for your insight and helping us set the stage for the discussion. Before I pass the floor to Mr. Emanuele Busacca, I'm receiving a message that Mr. Verle is now able to join us. Great.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead, you have the floor.
Yeah, and I'm very sorry for these technical problems. And also, I thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this important event. You know that we have received already many position paper and from third country and NGOs. And of course, we are considering this position very carefully, and we take them into account in our discussion with EU member states. And I will, of course, listen and very carefully also to what is said today. But maybe very briefly, because Emanuele Busacca and Michel Reynaud will explain what is new in the regulation, I would just like to recall that under the current EU organic regulation, group certification is not possible for the operators in the EU. That means that they must be certified individually, so even small farmers has to bear directly the cost and administrative burden of individual certification by an independent control body. So, however, as you know, group certification has been made possible in third country, but those was based only on guideline. It was not in legally binding, a guideline that was published by the Commission in 2008. And then, so we went through the reform of the EU organic sector starting in 2012. And there was a very intensive discussion between the Commission, but also the European Council and the European Parliament on group certification. And the conclusion that the system of group certification should be allowed in EU as well, in order to reduce the certification cost, especially for the small farms. But this possibility has been clearly accompanied by condition for the system to offer guarantees in terms of control efficiency that are comparable to individual certification and to limit the group certification only to small farmers. So as a result, the new EU organic regulation specifies that a group for the purpose of certification may only be composed of farmers with a size limit of the holdings. And each group shall have legal personality and establish a system for internal control. And it is important to note that the Commission is not empowered to modify those provisions. So on the other hand, now the Commission is empowered to adopt what we call the secondary legislation concerning the functioning of the internal control system and the dimension of the group of operators for purpose of certification. And this discussion with EU member states are still ongoing. And the aim is to conclude the technical discussion with member states and to launch the adoption procedures of this relevant secondary legislative act by the end of 2020. So we are in the end of the process, but it's still under discussion. And so, as I just mentioned, the new rules concern the introduction into the EU of the principle of group certification. That means that third countries are, of course, free to set up their own standards for organic farming, But however, of course, when an organic product is exported to the EU by means of control bodies certified by the Commission, this product must comply with the EU organic production rules, including the provisions on group of operators for the purpose of certification. And one of the major concerns expressed by third country in developing country is that the maximum size of the groups will oblige well-established large group to break up their organization to cope with the new rules. And we all know that the success of the organic sector, and particularly in developing countries, is closely linked to the way producers have been able to group themselves into cooperative association of group of cooperative. And so far, indeed, this group has served as the support of group certification. And we understand, of course, that this group also have many other functions that are essential to the development of their activities. But what we say is that the provisions of the new organic regulation do not oblige this existing group to be dismantled. And it's quite possible that the existing cooperative or group of cooperative association could serve as umbrella for subgroup or branches established for the purpose of certification for the EU scheme. And of course, indeed, each of these groups should comply with the new rules, that means including having a legal personality, but the new organic regulation does not specify what type of legal personality is required. So it could be a very simple legal personality, but of course in line with the relevant national legislation. And just to conclude, I would like to highlight a very particular, very important consideration, is that the EU organic market is the second in the world in terms of value and is really growing, probably going first soon. And we consider that the EU market can be sustainable and profitable for both EU and non-EU producers only if European consumers may maintain their trust in the EU organic logo, and in particular with regards to imported products, and they remain willing to pay a premium price for organic product. And we have discovered, reported in the audit carried out by the Commission, some really serious weaknesses of some control, internal system control of particularly large group. And that's raised serious concern about the assurance given by the control system of those large groups and the risk that such group might be covered by a single certificate. And so we consider that the risk of decertification of large producers group and of the loss of the EU organic consumer regarding imported product might have a much greater potential impact than the required changes to adapt to the new rules. But anyhow, to conclude, I assure you that the EU Commission is looking for the best possible compromise between the need for a system for group certification which provide the same level of assurance as the individual certification, but while facilitating the access to organic production by small producers, of course, including in third country. So again, thanks a lot for the invitation, and I will be very happy to listen to what will be discussed today and maybe be available to reply for some question at the end. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much to everyone and for helping us set the stage for the discussion. Before I pass the floor to Mr. Emanuele Busocca, who will be moderating the technical discussion, we would like to have an understanding of who is who participating. So we're launching a very quick poll, which you see on the screen. Please let us know which group you represent. This will be for around 1 minute. Okay. The first one is if you're a farmer or farmer cooperative, private company, government institution, development organization, certifier. Okay, we have the results. We have 15% of the participants from farmers or farmer cooperative, 20 from a private company, 32% government institutions, and 22% development organization, 11% certifiers. So we have a very good representation. With that, I'll pass the floor to Emanuele. You have the floor, Emanuele.
Hello, I hope you can see and hear me. Thank you, Kidest, first of all. I'm very happy to see this huge participation. The topic is very important. Of course, it's very relevant for countries or macro regions where this particular certification system already exists and it's implemented since many years, even decades. But of course, I think there is also a lot of interest because the date of application of the new EU organic regulation is really, let's say, very close behind the corner. It was supposed to be in 2021, while almost certainly it will be implemented from 2022. So anyway, there is a bit more time to adapt also for all EU farmers, producer, but also non-EU farmers and producer and traders. So I am Emanuele Busacca and I work in IFOAM Organics Europe, that is the European Federation for Organic Farming and Production. We are based in Brussels, and today I will be the technical moderator of this technical session. I will try to be as neutral as possible because I'm the moderator, but as many of you know, IFOAM Organics Europe, together with IFOAM Organics International, have really worked a lot on this topic in the last 2 years. And in reality, IFOAM Organics International since decades work on group certification. And also we sent our positions to the EU Commission and the EU member states. But let's say that we can now start immediately with the first speaker. And the first speaker is Michel Renaud. Michel Renaud is the Vice President of EcoCert, that's one of the biggest certifiers, organic certifiers worldwide. Michel is also board member of IFOAM Organics Europe, and he will tell us about the changes that we can expect in 1 year and 3 months from now, but also about the challenges, the possible challenges, and also about possibly the opportunities of the new EU regulatory requirements. So Michel, please, the floor is yours now.
Thank you very much, Emanuele, for this introduction. And you say, as you say, we'll talk about the group certification in organic, and I think it's a big challenge, but it's also a big challenge will be also the answer that will the new EU rules bring. I think it will bring us a lot of challenge to face. Next slide, please. So first, maybe some figures and some reminders concerning the Grover Group certifications. So the main objective is really to lower certification cost, but to make it available and accessible to small-scale farmers and operators, and that they can access also to the market. And I think this is the most important. Some really quick figures worldwide to have an overall ID. We speak about 2.6 million organic farmers, which is quite a lot. We speak about nearly 6,000 organic groups, and it's a figure of 4.5 million hectares. So the main products, and historically speaking, were coffee and cocoa, but we have also sugar, honey, cotton, sesame seeds, and many other products. And which is interesting is to see that the average of a farm size is 1 to 4 hectares. And this is really depending from the supply chain and depending also from the countries. And if we include other schemes, certification schemes, not organic, but sustainable agricultures like rainforest or Alliance UTZ and fair trades, we are speaking about 5.6 million producer and group certification. So I think group certifications is and will still stay an issue for all these farmers, and also to have access to their national market, but also to the export markets. Next slide. Quickly also, I will not go into details, but you can have a look on the group certification today. So we divided in the 3 main regions where they are distributed. It means Latin America, Africa, and Asia. And we see that the distribution of a group, of a number of group, is quite very high in Asia, and what we can see is that the size of a group are much more bigger in Africa, and we have group size in Latin America, which are much more small, that we consider from 80 members to 250, when we can have until 10,000 in Africa. So when we speak really about group certifications, we speak about several realities and several figures. You can see here the distribution of the total certified areas. I think that we can see also there the average size, which is close from Africa and Asia, and a little bit bigger in Latin America. And the last point, which we will come back later on, is who is carrying on and coordinating the ICS, the internal control system. We see that in Latin America, it's much more self-organized group doing this. And if we have a look on Africa and Asia countries, most of the group are organized. We say trader-led groups, but we should understand by traders, exporters or processors having supply chains, and they are leading and managing and also financing the internal control system. Next slide. So the group certification today, as I've said before, we have really two type of organizations that we can see is organized farmer groups, mostly is cooperative, but it could be also associations and all kind of type of legal forms. They are representing the legal personality, and actually it's the majority of existing group of certifications. And mainly we can find them in Latin America and Africa, but I think very strong in Latin America, and I think it's due to also historically things which is like this, and the supply chain are mostly coffee and cocoa. On the other side, we have the so-called trader, what I do not like really. I think it's really mostly exporters and processors who are managing the group, which are their suppliers. And the legal entities foreseen is the exporter or the processors. And we see that less than half of existing group of certification of today. So it's a slight majority in cooperative, but it's still a majority. And then this kind of organization we can see mostly in Asia and Africa. And then we have also all kinds of products, but it could be vegetable oils or sugar, cotton, rice as a big commodities. So next slide. The group certification today, as Nicolas already mentioned, it's already possible, but it's only possible in third countries and only in the so-called list developing countries, which are defined by the OECD, and which is quite a large list, but it was not possible to do it within the Europe. And the the large farmers, because we have still group in many countries with large farmers. They could be member of a group, but as they do not fill the criteria, they were externally inspected every year, but they were put in the group certifications, and they were also listed in the group certificate. The processors and exporters also, they need to be externally inspected every year. The group is already mostly established based on written agreements. Some are legal entity like cooperative, but most when we have a so-called trader managed group, the entities, the exporters or processors, and the farmers are have a written agreement with this company. The external inspection of group member is performed following a risk-based approach. And the policy until now, and in this, was to have the square root and to have a coefficients till 1.4 square roots in terms of when we have to certified risky operations. And when I say operation, it's mean group of operators. And there were also some criteria that we can find still in the new regulations. So the similar production system, geographical proximity, which is always nice to write it, but it's quite complex also to clearly define it when we want to define it. And the marketing must be carried out as a group, which is the situation of today. And next slide, we will move to the new situation. Yeah, next slide, please. Yes, thank you. And then these are the change. No, and first we will present the main change which are coming on in 2022. Each group of operators should be composed of farmers or operators, and in addition, also we have must be engaged in processing, preparation, or marketing of food and feeds, which is very important in these criteria. Now is, which is will have big impact, is to have a legal personality, and we keep the geographical proximity and also the joint marketing system, which was to market it. And also they can be based in EU member state or in third countries. And so it's not anymore limited to the developing countries, it's also open to all of third countries. So it's less restricted, so it means it will apply all over the world, inclusive the EU. Next slide, please. And also, which there's a need to establish a system for internal control system, and the person must be identified who will be responsible. So I think the new regulation has tried both existing guideline to precise many things, and I think we can see that it's the positive aspect to try to have better defined the ICS, that we all understand and speak the same languages when we speak about internal control system and group certifications. So the will of Commission and member states and Parliament to better define and to have a clear I would say definitions or way of defining Grover Group certification, I think we can welcome it. Maybe we can less welcome some points which are very detailed, but I think it's a very good thing to have make this this work until now. So next slide. Also, we have criteria. We had in the past the 2% of certification costs. This is much more details. We should always keep in mind, and maybe it's the difficulty also with this change, but this regulation should apply at the same time in the EU and in third countries. And as I've said before, we have to face with completely different realities or production system or social system all over the world, and it's very difficult when you have one universals applying everywhere to find a compromise on the right way to answer to all situations. So we have always this 2% of turnover, but we have also, additionally to this, a maximum of turnover of organic productions, or you can take also the standard output. It's mean the amount of good products. We have also a maximum which is fixed in terms of surfaces. So I don't go into details. You can see there, but it is well defined. And next slide. So now we have the Basic Act. What we call the Basic Act is the regulations 2018 848 have designed the main or the basic rules, and now is coming different, what we call in our language, secondary acts. We have implementing act and delegated act. We will precise these regulations. It means we can only precise, we can add some things where it's foreseen to be precise, but we cannot change what is fixed in the basic regulation. And I think when you read Article 36 in the basic regulations, keep in mind, we cannot change anything today. This is fixed, and it helps nobody to try. We would like to have this, or we will not. We know it's at the present times until the next revision of the regulations, but it seems to appear each 10 years. So I think we should concentrate now on the implementation of this regulation, where we can change, or the way we can have a positive input. So now we have 2 delegated acts and 1 implementing act. They describe how the internal control functions. I think the most concerned point, and I try to keep these 3 points. I think there are the 3 main points. The first is, which is new, is the maximum size of a group, which is 2,000 members. I think it's important to remind also to the participants, attendees, but the first draft was with 500. And with a legal entity, due to many discussions, we could come and to a consensus to 2,000 members. And also keep in mind that not always think the Commission is pushing for this, but the Commission also has to deal with all the member states, and they have also their word to say there, and they have also an influence. And I think if we have to, if we want to change something, we have also to convince them, not only to convince Mr. Velle, but also to convince all the member states. And this is the situations where the member states are also looking for this new global group, or this new situation, which is quite new for them. And I think there's also in some ways maybe some fears on their side, not to move to individual certification, to only group certification. So they try to have also a limited access within the EU, and I think this is the spirit of some of them for sure. And we have to find this compromise, which is really also sometimes very challenging. The second one is, and which is have an impact, but I will speak later on, is which is not foreseen today, is sampling and analysis of 2% of a total number of members of a group. It's mean if you have a group of 2,000, which is the maximum, it's quite a lot of analysis to carry out, when we know that on the EU level for individual farmers is 5% of the total of certified operators. And then the last point, so one of the last point is the external verification done by the certification bodies to verify this is 5% of the total numbers of members, which is already the situation is square root, sometimes with a coefficient until 1.4. And this will have a big change up from 400 members. It will have a big change and a big impact. And I think if you take the square root of 2,000, I think it's 45, and if you take 5% is 100. So instead today to see or to visit 45 members, we will have to visit 100 members, which is an increase of 124%. And also these rules and these regulations, delegated and implementing act, also define very quickly the responsibility of individual members. Next slide, please. So the potential impact on this, and I think what I already mentioned, is not only the limited size of 2,000, is that they will have to split into groups for the existing, which are more than 2,000. And we have seen in some regions and countries, this is the case we have. And they have to establish a legal personality for each group. It's mean today, if you have a group of 6,000, a cooperative, then they will have to establish 3 organizations to keep the one, maybe the cooperative were 2,000, but to have 2 associations of farmers and so on. So the position, the discussion we have had, we can understand to limit the size. It makes sense to limit the size in terms of also risk for the cooperative, because if you decertified, it's all the group. So dividing in 3 times 2,000, if you have an ICS or with some village where it does not work properly, it could be foreseen as an advantage in order to minimize the risk in terms of decertifications if you have only a one group. That's the reason we were pushing for subgroups or clusters, which could be a compromise, but it seems that on this aspect, there's not so much place to handle, and probably you should be prepared to organizing a legal entity for each group of maximum 2,000 members. And small farmers led by traders or processors, which is also nearly also a big part. This is not the biggest one, but this is a big part of actual situations. They will have to need to be organized on a separated legal entity, and also here with 2,000 members, maximum 2,000 members each. So this is also be a big change. As Nicolas mentioned, it could be the simple legal entity that you can find in your country, but nevertheless, you have to register, you have to have also administrative, and it's quite also additional could be seen as an additional burden. Okay, and I think it's the next slide. I will move on the sampling analysis, where I already discussed on this, and I think it will increase really the cost of certification. We have done some simulation, but I will really invite it. Certified, but not certified, but group certification, grower groups and also institutions in their own country really to make simulation on what kind of impact compared to today. And we know that analysis must be done by accredited laboratory, so it's also a requirement that in many times we have even to send the sampling to the EU or in some countries, but not in the country where we are doing the audits. So we have problem with the customs, sometimes opening the sampling or with the transport logistics. So it could be a big burden, and I think it's one point we should again discuss, and it will be interesting also to have good figures and invite you also to make the simulations, what it means for your own group with this kind of change. Concerning the 5%, it's clear this 5% is also based already, and it does exist since many years in the certification of grower group by the European Accreditation or International Accreditation Forum, where they use the square root of n, but with a minimum of 5%. Because we see we see the situation of today when we have a high number of members, it's clear when you use the square root, at the end, you are not really sometimes a representative external inspection. So if 5 right numbers or the 3 or 4 are better, but it seems that is the one already based also on the European accreditations, and also there I do not see so much move to have a common consensus, and we should keep in mind that the member states also are there. as I say, it will have some consequence, and I think it's important you can measure them. I make a small exercise when I take the square root 2000 and in terms of inspection days, because it's mostly the way the certifiers also are invoicing. It's clear if you move from square root to 5%, and let's say you make 6 inspections a day, then it will be 8 days more than of inspections. So it will also be additional cost for this. And last slide, please. Very quickly on the NOP, because we are supposed to speak about the EU regulations. It's only to know that there is parallel also a revision of the process, and there's current revisions on the applied national standards, and they have also draft legal documents on organic growth group. They are already in consultations, and it was until October 2020. We could see, but this is only for information, we could see differences with EU regulations. First, there's the possibility there to have establishment of subgroup. There's no maximum of group members, and the NOP seems to want to keep the square root, and with a coefficient of 1.5 times in terms of risky operations. And the annual physical inspection of a group of operators is mandatory of NOP. It is also mandatory in, this is very complex, but it's also mandatory for the Grover group itself. But it seems that the derogations, but Mr. Velek could correct me, but for the external inspection of the members in terms of low risk operations, that the derogations foreseen to have 2 physical on the spot inspection each 24 months could be possible. But the group itself, it is requiring in the existing draft to, it's once a year and must be done physically. Okay, thank you for your attention. I hope you have a clear overview of the main change concerning Grover groups. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michel. I think now the participants will need some time to digest all the changes if they don't know already. But for this reason, before passing to the next speaker, we have already a question for you, and you can answer in the chat, and then the organization will collect these comments. And the question would be, which measures or actions need to be taken by the group of producer or the producer organizations, the farming communities, to deal and mitigate the impact of the regulatory changes? So if you have any comment or any answer or any feedback on this question, please answer on the chat box. We also see some hand raising, but please use the Q&A tool that is at the bottom of the screen, and we will see the question there. And now we can pass to the next speaker, that is Marique de Peña from the Dominican Republic, and who will represent CLAC, the Latin American Caribbean Network of Fair Trade Small Producer and Workers. And Marique will present us the perspective and also the challenges from the region, from that region, let's say, so Latin America and Caribbean. So please, Marique.
Thank you very much. I will speak in English, but my presentation is in Spanish, so sorry for that. And I will try to give the perspective of Latin American producers, which I know best, but also African and Asian producers that are in similar situation and need to change their way of producing organic very soon. So next slide, please. Okay, I will start to talk about the change that referred to the change in size of a group on the group certification. And this change is going from no limits in number of farmers certified under a group certification mode to a maximum of 2,000 producers per legal entity and internal control system. As already explained by Michel, this impacts negatively coffee, cocoa, and other commodity smallholders cooperatives in the 3 continents, Africa, Latin America, and Asia. And these commodities are in supply chains that are already heavily impacted by climate change and low prices at cooperative as well as at farm level. Many of these farmers, members of the cooperatives, still live in poverty and need the support of strong organizations to have access to and participate in global supply chains, negotiate better prices, and be able to stay in farming. So this is our reality we face day by day. This change creates quite some financial burden for the cooperatives, their members, and also affect their collective negotiation power. The cost of organic, as already has been said, certification, control systems, and also the follow-up and implementation of norms will increase, but also the cost of other certifications, because many of our cooperatives are not just only organic certified. We need other kind of certifications to be able to collocate our products in the market. And each time buyers demand more and different kinds of certifications. So also the cost of other certification a group managed as will need to be reorganized and in different legal entities, and this will increase even more their cost. But on top of the cost of certifications and different kind of certifications or cooperatives have, also the cost of governments, administrations, and other services cooperatives deliver to the members will increase, because all these services will need to be reorganized in different legal entities. The change, as mentioned, weakening the bargaining power of farmer organizations and its capability to capture more value of supply chains, the reason why we exist, with negative impact on farmers' income, living conditions, and the development of rural economies, and also on possible human rights violations and the sustainable and future of family farming. Finally, this change in group size undermines the mission of small farmers organizations to create access to market for even the most vulnerable farmers through a strong collective offer and economies of scale. The changes in the organic regulations, both in the size of a group as well as the size of farms within the group, create barriers that will end up excluding small and medium-sized farmers from trade at the benefits of companies of scale. Next, please. La próxima. With regards to the size of producers that qualify to be part of a group certification, Michel already explains that from no limits to farm size to a maximum of 5 hectares and 0.5 hectares in the case of greenhouses and 50 hectares in the case of grasslands, or only those producers with individual cost of certifications does not exceed 2% of their annual income through sales, and annual income through sales should not exceed 25,000 euros. Well, this change will affect heavily small farmers' participation in organic production and will exclude many farmers from global trade, or convert organic production in conventional production with negative social as well as environmental consequences. Probably unintended, but the limited on farm size will demotivate small farmers to invest in crop diversification, biodiversity, and production for family consumption, and increase monoculture, as farmers will try to maximize commodity volumes on their plot. Also, the proposed size is not based on an analysis with regards to a sustainable or viable farm site. A viable farm size will vary from crop to crop and depend on the average size of farms that dominate a specific supply chain, as well as the cost of sustainable production and decent livelihoods. The change in regulation has been motivated, amongst others, by establishing the same rules for farmers in the north as farmers in the south, without taking into account that the farmer in the north is able to capture far more value out of a supply chain than farmers in the south due to shorter supply chain and stronger bargaining power. Producers in the south receive just a small percentage of the value of a product, with increasing cost due to climate change and recently COVID. Farmers' income not necessarily cover the cost of decent living and basic needs. Contrary to northern countries, are not guaranteed by local governments. Low income increase vulnerability and indirectly poverty in farming communities. And what about farmers that exceed the size of 5 hectares? Are they able to pay for an independent certification? Probably not, as the certification costs go far beyond the cost of the certificate and the inspection. And I gave some samples on bananas, which you can see that the real cost of certification is almost the double of the cost of a certificate. Next slide, please. And thus the reduction of the farm size really level the control of a cooperative over its members, one of the reasons behind the proposed changes. The answer would depend on if members with independent certification could still be part of a legal entity, which is unclear and need to be better formulated in the regulation. But if these members could stay, this would probably weaken and not strengthen the collective control, as the internal control system only covers the members under group certification, which will challenge the guarantee the cooperative need to offer to its buyers in volume as well as organic compliance. If the farmer bigger than 5 hectares would be excluded from the legal entity, this would affect not just their ability to participate in organic production, but also other certifications needed to secure access to markets, as fair trade, rainforest, global gap, amongst others. Excluded small and medium-sized farmers are on the risk to lose market access, and the smallest farmers on the group certification not necessarily reach sustainable level of productivity and income. Next generation of family farmers is not guaranteed, impacting food safety and increasing global poverty. Finally, the norm also needs to be better formalized with regard to the coexistence of organic and conventional producers in the same legal entity. Many cooperatives manage organic as well as conventional production and trade. If the coexistence is not possible, this will weaken the cooperative and its collective bargaining power even more and excludes more farmers from access to trade. Final slide, please. Well, in summary, the reflections as mentioned should have been taken into account by the European during the consultation and have been presented by many of our embassies and governments. Changes will have economic, social, and environmental impact on smallholders, organizations, production, and trade. Farmers' income already has been heavily under pressure in many commodities during the last decades. We have seen it in coffee, we have seen it in bananas. And cost of production have increased due to climate change and COVID. The changes in regulations will affect farmers' income even more due to increased costs in certification, governance, operations, and services. The most vulnerable farmers will end up being poorer, and many small and medium-sized farmers will be excluded from trade. Linked to the exclusion of farmers and the increased vulnerability of others is the negative social impact on access to basic needs, food safety, and decent livelihoods. Poverty and hunger will probably increase, as well as the risk of human rights violations, contrary on what the world expects to achieve from now to 2030. And finally, there also will be a negative environmental impact on biodiversity, soil health, and the use of pesticides. I want to end this presentation with a plea to the European Union to not consider these measures as final and enable a dialogue with impacted farmers and their governments to find proper solutions to the objectives of organic integrity, increased control, and similar norms for northern and southern farmers. But due to the differences between these farmers in the north and in the south in bargaining power and access to rights, similar does not mean the same norm for different realities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your assessment of the impact in Latin America and Caribbean area. Let's go now to another macro region. We go to the next speaker, Karen Mapuswa. She's representing the Pacific community, and she's also vice president of IFOAM Organics International. And she's based in Fiji, and she will report about the same challenges and impact on the Pacific area. So please, Karen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Emanuele. Good morning, everyone. It's morning for me, 3 o'clock in the morning. But thank you very much for the opportunity to talk a little bit about the impact that the regulation will almost certainly have on organic producers from the Pacific Islands. Next slide, please. Just briefly, the red stars are over countries which currently have producers certified to the EU regulation. Papua New Guinea being the largest and the Cook Islands being the smallest. So they are a variety of products, mostly coffee and coconut products, but also a few other things such as some rum out of French Polynesia. Kava is becoming important, and spices such as turmeric and ginger are also exports from the region towards the European Union. Next slide, please. So just briefly, agriculture in the Pacific context is largely still traditional, very low input systems based on agroforestry. That's still predominant across the region. Agrochemical usage is largely confined to introduced horticulture crops like tomatoes and cabbage, which are for local consumption, not the type of crops that we tend to organically certify or export. Production systems for some of our more traditional crops like taro, which are now exported, have moved away from traditional and organic production systems. But again, these are not the things that we tend to export to the EU. Our smallholder family farms are still the norm, mostly under 4 hectares. And some of our countries have even banned agrochemicals in order to protect their water tables, or because traditional leadership have seen that this is an important thing to do for environmental protection. Now, obviously, agrochemical usage is not the only piece of organic certification, but it is the one where I guess that consumers are concerned about from a risk perspective. So from that perspective, we are a very low risk region as far as contamination from agrochemicals within the supply chain. If I can have the next slide. Being a very small region, our numbers are very small, but we can see organic certification growing dramatically over the last 8 to 10 years. We do see the number of farmers certified going up and down a little bit, often depending on the number of negative climate events in the region. A large cyclone will often take people out of certification for a couple of years if they're growing a tree crop like coconuts, because the farmers can't afford to maintain their organic certification for the 3 years it takes the crops to revive after a cyclone. So you do see numbers going up and down, but there is a general trend towards growth in the sector, both in number of farmers and hectares under production. The vast majority of these farmers are under grower groups. There is a very small percentage of individual licensees, very small percentage of farms that would be large enough to justify having independent certification and having a cost benefit from certification. If I can take the next slide. So most of the impacts have been really well explained by the previous speakers, so I don't want to go into too much detail, but just specifically, the limits on the size of grower groups will have some impact on us. At the moment, we only have 3 or 4 groups that have over 2,000 members, but the number of groups with over 2,000 members is set to increase, and we can see another maybe 3 coming into that group within the next couple of years, and that will continue to grow. Again, it's around those tree products mostly, so coffee and coconut. Kava, which many of you may not be familiar with, is a local drink. It's a traditional drink, but it has a fairly high value in the pharmaceutical industry, and exports for kava are growing dramatically. It's very important for the region. That will be a product that will be very severely impacted by the new regulation, because the grower groups will be important in having us achieve volumes for that. The biggest challenge really is that in the Pacific, most of our grower groups are not legal entities. They're operated by a processor or an exporter who hold the license, and individual growers are then contracted to the licensee and organized and supported. Traditionally in our region, cooperatives are not very successful, which is why this model works for us. And while I recognize the suggestion that maybe establishing a simple sort of legal entity is an option, in our region there are very few options for simple legal entities. We struggle with very complex legal systems, often with long colonial histories that haven't been reviewed and are not very flexible or creative in allowing us to form the sort of groups that might actually work. It also adds a layer of cost and bureaucratic complexity to groups of growers who just do not have that within their frame of reference. So it will be excluding growers. We can imagine and see that several of the groups currently exporting would really struggle to be able to establish and then maintain any sort of legal status going forward. So that compliance will really be a significant challenge for us. The other challenge around size is, of course, limiting the larger farms. One of the models that has been promoted across the region, not only in organic, but also for conventional exports, is to have 1 or 2 larger farmers that can provide a stable level in order to export, which then smaller farmers can add on to, opening up that opportunity for those micro farmers. The regulation is looking to remove that opportunity and to really impact on a model that has been promoted across the region as an effective way of facilitating smallholders into supply chains. Next slide, please. Again, the minimum inspection and the increased requirement for testing really will increase our costs of certification. And this is the #1 limiting factor as it stands, is the cost. We are a region that does not have a certifying body. When we need an organic inspection, we are flying in inspectors from Australia or New Zealand or Asia to undertake the inspections. Keeping them in country for a longer period of time will substantially increase those costs. Speaking to some of the certifiers that currently work in our region, they're estimating that currently a per farm cost for testing is around 300 euros, excluding the costs for shipping those samples off to, again, Australia or New Zealand to an accredited lab. So to increase that is really going to be hitting the pocket of a smallholder farmer. At the moment, most of these costs are managed through the internal control system by the processor or the exporter. If that moves down the chain towards the growers, it will have a really major impact, and we will lose farmers out of certification, and we will lose things like supply of coffee. As I said before, many of our grower groups are very low risk. I've spoken to organic auditors who inspect in Papua New Guinea, for example, who are walking 5 or 6 or 9 hours up mountains in order to do inspections. So that, adding more time in country, visiting more farms like that is going to be such a major impact on our grower groups, which are, as they stand, already very, very low risk. If I can just take the next slide, please. So we have been working on trying to start some preparation in the region. It's quite challenging. I am not sure if there's too many people from the Pacific online at the moment due to the hour, but we have really been encouraging all of our operators to talk to the governments. We've become aware through this process that many of our governments are not actually aware of the products that are leaving the Pacific to the European Union, and so have not been as vocal in these discussions as perhaps they would have been if they had a real understanding of that. And the discussions need to be both with the agriculture and the trade ministries. Our farmers groups tend to talk only to agriculture and they miss the trade component, but having those discussions is really, really important. We have a local regional body, the Pacific Organic and Ethical Trade Community, which can support licensees and grower groups understand how this will impact on their operations, and also start to talk to them about how to prepare. Now, one of the issues of preparation will be cost, as well as understanding and capacity. That will be a challenge. We have some opportunities coming up through projects that are coming online through the Pacific community and also through POETCOM, which might be able to help with this. The Regional Indicative Program with the European Union has a component to support farmers into voluntary sustainability standards. There's also being some support being provided for building our Pacific Regional Organic Guarantee System. We'll be able to utilize some of that support in helping grower groups prepare for this change. We also are working with the ITC on the Alliances for Action, which will be looking at some support in coconut and kava in particular. And we'll be looking at how we can work with the ACP Business Friendly Program to also provide some of these supports. Of course, preparing and meeting the requirements in the initial stage is one thing, but the challenge will be the ongoing increase in cost, which will be a year-to-year burden for our grower groups and for smallholder farmers. This can only be met by increasing our sales and reducing our costs in other ways. That is the real challenge. And I do fear that we will be losing people from the organic certification and from those market opportunities because of this increasing barrier of higher costs. It's really complex. And if there are ways to still negotiate on some of these points that will result in the higher cost structures for our farmers, I think that is an important discussion to be had so that we can continue to have our farmers selling into the European Union on some of the products that are both important to our region and also important to the European consumer. And that's all I have, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. That's for sure very important to have the discussion. And after the next speaker, we will ask Mr. Verlet where the room for movement or for change is at this stage. So thank you for the assessment of the Pacific. So we had the impact assessment of 2 macro regions, very important. But we go now to the next speaker, Sergi Corbalan. He is Executive Director of the Fair Trade Advocacy Office here. He's based here in Brussels. And Sergi will put a bit all the discussion in the, let's say, policy context in Brussels. So please, yes. Sergi, it's your turn now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So greetings, everybody, and thanks in particular to ITC for hosting this very important webinar. And I hope nobody will take offense, but this webinar should have been hosted and organized by the EU long time ago. I'm very worried about the impact that has been shared by the colleagues from the Caribbean, Latin America, and the Pacific. And we believe it reflects a wrong regulatory strategy by the EU. Mr. Leonard Mizzi, with whom we respect a lot, has explained a very good process, a new process that is now being set up, a multi-stakeholder process on cocoa. And it's great, these new plans. However, for the organic rules, it is the opposite of what has happened. It's been a process of regulatory imposition of new rules on the non-EU countries, in particular developing countries, unfortunately, without taking into account sufficiently, as it has been said, the characteristics, socioeconomic characteristics and climate characteristics of other countries. And then we are now stuck with these rules that have been adopted, and now it's late because the room for maneuver is very limited at this stage, because we're only talking about the secondary legislation at this stage. So it is a pity that this has happened this way. It is even more worrying that from a regulatory strategy from the EU, that these things are happening now while the US is also discussing the same technical regulations. And we see now that we may end up that small farmer cooperatives that sell to both markets need to comply with an ever decreasing, ever diverging, variety of regulations in the north. As Marique de Peña has said, this will put weak farmers even in a weaker position. To be constructive, we do have some room for maneuver at this stage with the secondary legislation. So let's hope that the European Commission and the member states will use this opportunity to introduce some adapted measures as proposed by IFOAM and many other speakers when it comes to the group certification. We also believe it is very important to think about the future, because possibly, if I understand well, by March 2021, we're going to be having a complete set of rules. And there may be indeed some implementation and transition period. Could be interesting to hear that from the EU as well. But given that, regrettably, the regulatory approach of the Commission hasn't been up to standards when it comes to at least how we believe that sustainability should be promoted globally, we hope at least that the EU will have responsibility in the after-sales service, let's say, of the adoption of the rules. Meaning, we hope that the responsibility of supporting a transition, in particular the weakest actors in the chain, will be taken up by the Commission, supported by EU development cooperation, through an active support of EU delegations, through placing organic trade as a priority of economic diplomacy, so that small producer cooperatives have easy access to the growing EU organic market in the EU, and obviously that they will receive the right, the farmers will receive the right technical assistance. Let's not delegate, however, technical assistance to big international organizations. Farmers, organizations, farmer networks have a lot of expertise, as we have seen around the room. So when we think about technical assistance, let's also think about farmer-led technical assistance with the goal to minimize the negative impacts and make sure that if the process hasn't been ideal, at least that the new rules and their implementation in the future will be a win-win, of course, for consumers, but also for small producers in the Global South. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergi, for your intervention. And so if Nicola is still here, we would like to know better what is the room for maneuver at this stage. This is very important to clarify. And yes.
Emmanuel, if I may kindly make an observation again,
yes,
that
course.
EU is not imposing anything on third country. What we are talking about is that EU is introducing the possibility for using group of operators in the EU. But indeed, when EU is importing organic products from third country, which have the benefit of the EU logo, then of course the third country should apply the same rules that applying in the EU on group of operators. So, and organic is an optional scheme, so we don't impose anything. But if you want to have the benefit of the EU logo on the EU market, then you have to fulfill certain rules. So we are not imposing anything. I mean, it's important to of course, I don't deny that if a third country, developing country, would like to import to EU some organic product, then the new rules will have an impact on the way they have to fulfill the rules, and they could be increased, of course, and we would like to have a good balance between what we feel are the minimum requirements for control that will preserve, again, the trust of the EU consumer in imported goods. Because when, regarding the sampling, what happened now more and more is that EU importers are doing themselves the analysis, and when they're finding a lot of pesticide and unauthorized product coming from a group in third country, which didn't proceed to this analysis, then it ruined the reputation of the imported product. And at the end, it will be bad both for the EU producers and the third country producers. So we have to find a good balance between what is really necessary, but not to make additional unnecessary burden and cost. So we have to find a good way to have the balance which preserve the integrity of the system while minimizing the cost. So I think this is very important, again, to mention. And secondly, I insist again what I said when previous speakers speak that you will lose about the bargaining power and so on. No, because again, the existing cooperative group above 2,000 may stay. I mean, they can, again, be in charge of the technical service, of the marketing, of the providing some technical advice, or they can stay. We're just talking about that the group, only for the purpose of certification, could be a subgroup, a legal group, or a local group, and you need to have but it could be under the umbrella of the main cooperative, which could outsource. You need to have a legal personality. You need to have your own internal control system linked to the certificate only. We are just dealing for the purpose of certification, only that. And for that, the major group could, or even the trader, could outsource some people, some management to minimize the administrative costs. So this could be outsourced and shared. You could have a shared management, but the group, for the purpose of certification, should have legal personality, 2000, and the internal control system. That's it. That's the only thing he should have. So that's the only thing. And then for the small producers, I remind you that and I come to your question, Manuela, on what is, I would say, negotiable, but again, it's not me who is able to negotiate, it's the member states who should approve at the end. But what is in the Basic Act, as Michel mentioned, Article 36, is two things. First, the maximum size of the holding. This is not going to change. And it's not that because the European Parliament, the member states, and also the stakeholders in the Europe wanted that the group certification should be only reserved for small producers, and the medium and large size should go for the individual certification. And the small producers, it's 5 hectares, or it's an annual turnover of 25,000 euro. And for most, if I understand well, in developing countries, most of the small and poor producers are below 5 hectares and below 25,000 euro of organic turnover, annual turnover. But again, this was the strong willing of the European Parliament that group certification should be only open for small producers and the medium and large size to go for individual certification. And the second really strong willing of the European Parliament and the Council was that the certificate should be held by farmers group. That means that to be part of a group certification, you need to be a farmer. That means that the system base where the certificate is held by a trader or a processor, yes, then they should create a farmer group, and then they could sell it to have commercial contract. But this is things that are in what we call the Basic Act, that has been decided by the European Parliament, by the Council, the Commission, and stakeholders in the Europe. So this will not change unless you change the Basic Act, which, as you said, would be not before a few years. So what is still under discussion is the maximum size, but as you mentioned, Emanuele, as well, the majority of the member states wanted to have 500 hectares. So we try, because we had a lot of discussion with NGOs. We met with the Dominican Republic, with Mexico, with many. I was in the RCP group as well, so we discussed a lot for this past year. We didn't just be completely there, so we had a lot of discussion. We had also many position paper, and we tried to advocate to say we need to have a minimum size to be able to have also some means, and that we were able to push member states, and they didn't accept it yet, and it's not approved, but we tried to push until 2,000 people instead of 500. And then what is also under discussion now, which is not this time, is the 5% of external control. But you have to understand that it's only one external visit by a private independent control body every 20 years. And if I can give you an anecdote, the individual certification, even for small growers in the Europe, they are every year. Every year, there's an on-the-spot verification of an independent control body. And the Commission tried to introduce in the Basic Act that after 3 years, if you think that there's any non-compliance, we propose that there was an on-the-spot visit only every 2 years. And this measure to go only every 2 years was opposed by all the stakeholders, member states, including IFOAM, by the way, because they wanted to have annual independent visit on the spot to maintain the trust of the consumer. So that's the situation in the EU. And what we propose is an independent visit only every 20 years. That's the 5%. So you have to understand the situation. And then, yes, there is the issue which is still under discussion, which is the 2% of sampling that is still under discussion, where if you have still some elements and concerns and costs, please send it to us, and we are ready to look at that.
Thank you, Nicola. Let's say that one of the issue is the new compliance approach of the new organic regulation, because these rules are reasonable in the EU in a way, but they are not reasonable many other third countries, or in reality on the existing group. Because in the EU at the moment we don't have grower groups certified. So let's say that one of the issues is the compliance approach that it was taken in the Basic Act. But I know that Marike, yes?
If I may very quickly, when you say it's not reasonable, that's exactly what we think, that it's a good compromise, because I'm not saying that 2,000 for group certification, even in developing countries, not reasonable, because when we looked at also the feeble study, and we are doing on-the-spot visit, and we see that in large group, it's largely out of control, where you have a very poor management. So we believe that 2,000, it's a good compromise with not too small, not too big, and 5% of annual visit is also reasonable in developing and third country to ensure the security of the system. So what we try to have something that it applies to the EU, but it still makes sense for preserving the reputation of imported goods. So that's what we try to achieve. But
yeah,
okay.
Thank you, Nicola. Yeah, the problem, it was more the link with the legal personality. But I know that Marike want to give a feedback. Please, Marike.
Yes, I would like to do it. I definitely welcome the initiative of the European Union to open group certification to Northern or European producers. But what I do not understand is, as this group certification already exists during many years in southern countries with rules that have been accepted, why, if we would expand this to the European Union, why these rules need to be changed? For me, it would be far more logic to start with the existing rule, monitor what this would mean in the European context, and then consider to change it, but not changing the whole concept because some European farmers could be interested in certification. So that from the one side. On the other side, I understand that the legal entities are demanded for certification purpose only. To be very honest, for certification purpose only, you would not need any legal entity. You could split up existing legal entities in subgroups with sub-certifications. The whole thing on linking this to legal entities make it far more costly and indirectly apply to all other certifications a group may have. And then finally, on the 5 hectares, I understand and I agree that many of our farmers in the South are below 5 hectares. But are these farmers sustainable? Are they living in decent living conditions? Have they access to basic needs? Is their future secured? Are young people willing to step into farming? In reality, in Latin America, the average age of a farmer is almost reaching 60 years. And we have quite some challenges for young people to take over farming because farming is not considered attractive, it's not considered sustainable, and it does not offer decent living conditions to families. So if families want to have decent living conditions, they need to grow. And this decision put limits on growth. So it would put limits on reaching decent levels of income. Thank you.
Thank you, Marike. So yes, let's say it's a confirmation that the link with the legal personality and the splitting and creation of new legal personality probably is the main concern coming from the Basic Act, and let's say the 2% sampling and the 5% reinspection is anyway secondary legislation that can be changed I would say that also from the comments and from the question, the main issue at the moment is the legal personality. But from the question as well, I see something about transitional rules. You know that the new organic regulation will apply from 2022. And so I would like perhaps Michelle to explain the double level of transitional rules. So how long or how much time have the grower groups and the farmers to adapt to the new rules?
Yes, I think there's two, but Nicola can correct me if necessary. In the Basic Act, it is also foreseen, but the equivalency systems, there is a transitional rules in Article 57, so far as I remember, and it is foreseen with a postpone of the regulations that this recognition of the CBs on equivalency will expire at latest December 31, 2024. This is, it's mean until there, the existing under equivalency can continue. It's mean we have a couple of years in front of us. And also in the draft regulations, I don't remember the article in, I have done in head, but it also foreseen for existing, even if we move to the conformity, there's a possibility for existing grower group before the application of this secondary legislation, the possibility until, I guess, January 2024, that they maintain their size because they have, due to time to change the administrative things, to be above the 2000s. But I think from 1st January 2024, or it could be with the postponement. I don't know if it's 2024 or 2025, but there will be the possibility to have time to adapt, and they have time to adapt due to administrative, as we have heard, to build up association. And so in many countries, it's not really so simple as we can sometimes think here in the EU. Registration and so on could be also very complex burdens, administrative burdens. This is this. But Nicola can maybe correct me if I'm wrong.
No, it's so you have three, in a way, three transitional. One is the postponement of the full regulation of 1 year because of the COVID-19. Secondly, which is not adopted yet, but all the regulation which will be under what Michel called the secondary legislation, that is the maximum size of the group, the 5%, the 2%. Then there is also in this act a proposal for a 3 years transitional period that will be adopted together, I hope, with those regulations. And then, as Michel said, there is it's related to the control bodies, that they will switch to the current rules equivalence to the compliance. So they have also 3 years. And then until they do not switch to the new rules, they could apply the former one. So including, for example, the members which are managed by a trader, they can stay until their control body switch to the new rules, and they have to do it before the end of 2024. So altogether, we can say very generally that they are, from now on, there will be 4 years to adapt. That's the more or less the de facto situation. That's it. And for the legal, if I may, Emmanuel, very briefly for the legal personality, the ownership of a certificate should be linked to legal personality, because you are the owner of the certificate, and if you are decertified, it is linked, decertified, the legal owner, that means the group of the association, if you do not fulfill the rule and you are decertified by the control body. So it's this legal personality which is affected by this certification. And this is, again, in the Basic Act, the fact that you have to have a legal personality. But again, it could be a simple one. It would be the simplest you can find in your own national law, and it could be managed and outsourced by a bigger umbrella group that will help all these procedures. But it is linked. You cannot have a certificate without a legal entity. When you are individual farmer, you have a legal personality as farmer. So that's the idea. And again, this condition is on the Basic Act.
Okay, I see that Karen want to have a question or a feedback.
Yes, just a comment on the legal personality. I mean, as it stands for us in the Pacific, the legal personality is usually the exporter or the processor. We're asking groups of growers to form legal personalities, and at the most basic you can possibly get in the Pacific, that means hosting general meetings, which means costs for transporting growers around, organizing the group, the bureaucracy of that. It means an annual audit of their financial accounts. Again, another cost and another set of skills that need to be developed. I've worked with not-for-profit organizations in the Pacific for 20 years, both in the organic sector and outside of the organic sector. And I have not seen a new group form and be able to function effectively in under 10 years. It's a really long time frame to build the capacity for a group like that. And if we are talking about farmers in remote locations with challenges with communication and logistics and access, it's only more complicated. So I don't see that there are simple, easy options necessarily for forming these legal personalities. We have a system that works now. We are creating more barriers through that expectation.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Nicola, you have a final remark or?
No. Again, for this legal personality, I insist that it is in the Article 36, where a group operator shall only be composed of farmers and have a legal personality. It has been decided by the Parliament, the European Council, after 4 years of discussion, and this is not, the Commission is not empowered to make any change on that. So that's just, I want to insist that we do not have the capacity. What is under discussion now cannot be this aspect which is in the Basic Act.
Okay, thank you. I think, yes, that from the different discussion, the legal personality seems to be the major problem at the moment. I want also to inform you that there are different briefings that were made by also IFAM Organics International and IFAM Organics Europe, and these can answer to many of the questions that I see also on the Q&A tool and also on the chat box. So perhaps they can be circulated by the ITC, I think. And with these are 2 minutes left, so I will give back to Kidest for the conclusion.
Thank you so much, Emanuele, for this very rich discussion. We're almost at the end of the session. If there are no more questions, we would like to launch a very quick poll for your feedback. So please respond to the couple of questions. This feedback will be for ITC only. We'll not be sharing it right here. And while we gather your feedback, let me say that this has been a very rich discussion, which I'm certain will continue. And before we conclude, I would like to thank once again, on behalf of ITC, the European Union, and the Organization of African, Caribbean, Pacific States, International Federation of Organic Agriculture Movement, Latin America and Caribbean Network for Fair Trade, Small Producers and Workers, the Pacific Community, Fair Trade Advocacy, EcoCert, and to all the participants from the 87 countries. And once again, thank you very much to our speakers. And you can also follow ITC on Instagram, which will come up on the screen. Can you launch the? We'll be launching the poll quickly. Okay. So thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you on the other side. Ah, Yvonne.
Yeah, so sorry.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, just as we conclude, just to appeal to our colleagues from the European Commission that we continue this discussion, because I think we can do a lot in terms of, especially on the issue of the transition period to prepare our member states. I believe that we can continue this discussion and try and see what measures, what support can be put in place. I do know that the OACP and the EU is implementing a number of programs, intra-ACP programs, which go to addressing the development aspects. And I feel that we can use some of these programs to prepare our member states. So it's just an appeal to our colleagues from the Commission that we look at this and also discuss how we can set up the alert warning mechanism. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yvonne. So with that, we'll conclude. We have a lot of questions, which we'll be gathering them and posting them on YouTube. With that, thank you very much, everyone, and have a good evening.